Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, we will resume our discussion with text 7 of Nectar of Instruction. Syad Krishna Nam Charitadi Sitapya Vidya Pittopataptarasanasya Narochikanu Kintvadaradanudenam khalo sevyajushtha Swadvikramad bhavati tadagadamulahantri. The holy name, character, pastimes, and activities of Krishna are all transcendently sweet like sugar candy. Although the tongue of one afflicted by the jaundice of avidya, ignorance, cannot taste anything sweet, it is wonderful that simply by carefully chanting the sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue and his disease is gradually destroyed. So let's do a recap from the first verse, because this is a beginning of a new section of the Nectar of Instruction. So in the first three texts, the focus was on Shraddha or faith. The first verse talked about how everything begins with sense control, the vegam, controlling the different pushings. And by the acceptance of a spiritual master who has achieved this sense control, right? So this was the first stage of Komal Shraddha, soft faith. Then the instruction is that what we should practice to avoid that which is unfavorable. Right? Atyahara prayaschasya prajalpaniyamagra. So how to avoid that which is unfavorable and how to cultivate that which is favorable. Utsaha nishchaya dhairya tat karma pravartana. Right? So sense control also as a way for looking to take shelter of one who is practicing self-control. Avoid that which is unfavorable, practice that which is favorable, right? So these are the three verses that spoke about faith or Shraddha. Then verses 4, 5 and 6 spoke about the transition from Shraddha to Sadhu Sangha. So verse 4 talks about positively cultivating the association of devotees by the 6 loving exchanges, the Dati Pratiganati, Bhuyamarkhati, Prachiti, right? So while associating with the devotees as per the 6 exchanges, one should also be aware of the level of advancement of the devotees, and one should accordingly behave with them based on one's own advancement and one's own based on their advancement. And then verse 6 spoke about special attention given to the more advanced devotees who should not be ever evaluated by any material consideration. So we have now reached the stage of Sadhu Sangha. Shraddha has been completed. We have reached the stage of completion of Sadhu Sangha. So from text 7 is actually a very potent text in which 4 stages are covered. Bhajana Kriya, Nartha Nivritti, Nishtha and Ruchi. And as you can imagine, this verse talks about chanting of the holy name. So with faith one associates with the devotee, and what does he do in the association of the devotees? He chants. And what is the result of that chanting? The result of that chanting is Bhajana Kriya, which is now executing under the guidance of a spiritual master. Anartha Nivritti, which is freedom from defects. Nishtha is that the faith becomes strong, and Ruchi is one begins to develop a taste for it. All this is accomplished by by sincerely chanting the holy name. So summary of this verse, in verse 6, there was emphasized the need to be careful when dealing with advanced devotees. Now, one progresses from Kanishta Adhikari to Uttama Adhikari on the strength of one's devotional service. Nam, Roop, Guna, Leela of Krishna and his devotees. Serving Krishna's name by chanting, serving Krishna's Roop by deity worship, serving Krishna's Guna and Leela by speaking about them and meditating. And same thing about the exalted devotees of Krishna. So this is the path to spiritual progress from a neophyte stage to an advanced stage, right? And it includes, as I mentioned, these 4 stages: Bhajanakriya, Nathanivritti, Nishtha, and Ruchi. And how does one go from Anishtha to Nishtha? By understanding that the cause of Anishtha or fickleness is anarthas. Right? So, when the person goes through this transformation, crosses through Anishtha, reaches Nishtha and Ruchi, then the bhajan kriya is transformed. Right? It becomes now fixed when it is free of fences, and then one begins to develop a taste or ruchi, enjoyment in the process. So Srila Prabhupada writes a wonderful purport on this. Chanting is always very core for devotees and the Yuga Dharma. So Prabhupada writes extensively about it. So he speaks about the symptoms of the disease. The metaphor that is used is a jaundiced tongue considers the sugar candy or mishri to be bitter, whereas it is actually sweet. That's the symptom of the disease. What is the cause of the disease? Prabhupada analyzes it as individual accountability and collective accountability. And individual accountability is ignorance, forgetfulness, distraction, durashraya. Collective responsibility is atheistic leadership. Right? We'll speak more about each one of them. Then, what about the cure? The cure is chanting. The method is with care and attention, and the benefit is Cheto Darpan Marjanam. Right? That one's internal heart becomes clear. And Prabhupada also talks about the unique position of ISKCON to offer this cure. Right? And he talks about how people with little bit of faith begin to associate with devotees. They come to Sankirtan first just to enjoy out of curiosity, then they start chanting, then they go to the stage of Anartha Nivritti, they follow the 4 regulative principles, and in this way they make advancement. Right? And then the stage beyond cure, right, which is awakening of the dominant love of Godhead. Right? So this stage will be spoken of in the next verse, which is essentially Raghunath Bhakti. But Prabhupada talks about the general stage of Bhava, which comes after Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti. And the symptom there is that one is now free of the influence of Maya. So let's look at these wonderful points that Srila Prabhupada has made. Let's first try to understand the analogy that Rupa Goswami makes, that the intrinsic taste of sugar candy or mishri, as called in Hindi, is very sweet. However, when a patient with jaundice will taste it, it tastes bitter. And so this is one of the ways in which the Ayurvedic doctors detect jaundice. And now, of course, there are blood tests by which the bile level of the juice of the bile level of the liver is tested. But this is a much more easier and potent way, that when a person has jaundice and is asked to taste a piece of mishri, that sugar candy tastes bitter to such a person. And the cause is because of the excessive secretion of pitta. Right? Pitta is the quality of bile that is secreted by the liver. That because there is excessive secretion by the liver, it covers the tongue. And because it covers the tongue, the sugar candy is sweet. Right? So that's the metaphor, or that's the analogy. What does it mean? That just like bile covers the taste, avidya or misconception of one's spiritual identity provides the foundation of ahankar or false ego in the heart. That covers the jiva's taste for chanting. So even though chanting is like sugar candy and it is very, very sweet, in a disease state where the jiva's consciousness is covered by misconception or avidya. Right? So just like the tongue is covered by pitta, the consciousness is covered by avidya. And just like the pitta is secretion caused by a defective liver, avidya is the symptom of ahankar or false ego. Now, what is the cure? Interestingly, the cure for jaundice is also sugar candy. So, if one continues to taste or one continues to eat sugar candy, then even it may taste bitter to begin with. By its influence, it will cure the cause of the jaundice, and then it will begin to taste sweet. So similarly, in a disease state of ahankar and avidya, the chanting of the holy name is distasteful. Right? There's not much pleasure that is derived from it. But if one simply continues anudinam, right, just like the patient simply continues to take mishri on the orders of the Kaviraj or the doctor, similarly, if an aspiring devotee on the order of the spiritual master just continues to chant, then the same holy name that was distasteful now becomes sweet. Why? Because Moolahantri. Because the holy name destroys at the root the disease of ahankar and avidya that was covering the jiva's pure consciousness and causing him to find distaste in chanting. Intrinsically, all souls are good. That's the nature of the soul, right? They're spiritual, they're good. But by close association with the modes, they acquire the quality of the mode. Just like a person who's intrinsically healthy, by the influence of bile contracts jaundice and loses taste of sugar candy. Right? So all that remains to be done is to reverse the cause, and the taste will reappear. So what are the symptoms of the disease? Right? So now the metaphor is not really being used. The disease here is explicitly the disease of avidya and ahankar. What is the symptoms of the disease? Asat trashna, excessive thirst for material enjoyment. No desire for spiritual inquiry. Right? One may spend days and days talking about politics and warfare and stock market, but one may feel very distracted sitting for even 30 minutes in a class. That is the symptom of this material disease. Essentially, nectar tastes like poison and poison like nectar. Right? This is Srila Prabhupada's Krishna's statement in the influence of the different modes. So just like sugar candy is bitter to a patient of jaundice, the chanting of the holy name is poison to a materially conditioned soul. And when they're conditioning by anudinam, by gradually chanting on a daily basis regularly, then it will actually start becoming, the same sugar candy will now taste like nectar. So the difference is given between material and spiritual happiness. Right? So one may say that what does it matter whether the happiness is coming from the false ego or from avidya? At least I'm experiencing happiness. This is the main statements of materialists. Right? Once I was trying to preach to a person who came from who was very opulent. Right? He had a big inheritance, a lot of property, and I was making the point to him that take to spirituality because material life is miserable. But I'm making this point. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, this material world is dukhalyam ashashvatam. And he says, I don't agree with you. I have not a material happiness, right? I have variance of material happiness, and I'm very happy. I have a big house, I have many servants, my son is happily settled in the US, I have respect in my family, and I travel whenever I want, which is all factual, right? But then uh, later on he contracted cancer, right? Fortunately, he survived. But that's the nature of material happiness, that inevitably over time it declines. And the nature of spiritual happiness is that inevitably over time it grows. So one may, in the present moment, so like if you see this graph, at some point of time we see that material happiness is more than spiritual happiness. Now this is obviously the state when the person is in ignorance. So the person might say that when I indulge my senses, I'm happy. But when you ask me to chant, I'm unhappy. Right? So it's representing that stage, extreme left-hand side. But anudinam, that as the person keeps chanting, the spiritual happiness will go. And if the person does not chant, then just by the influence of time, kshina punya, just by the influence of time, the material happiness will decline. Right? So Krishna says in the 18th chapter that happiness in the mode of goodness is poison to begin with and nectar later on. Right? And whereas happiness in the mode of goodness is happiness in the mode of ignorance. Material happiness is nectar to begin with and poison later on. Like somebody may say that let me eat as much palatable food as I can. Right? So they pile the plates full of all kinds of food and they eat it, and while they're eating it, the senses are fully engaged. The tongue is enjoying, the stomach is enjoying, the belly is enjoying, but then they have indigestion after that. So small period of nectar, long period of poison. And somebody else might say that I will refrain from eating until I get Krishna Prasad. Some amount of poison because control of the senses, but when they indulge in Krishna Prasad, then nectar for a very long time, right? So the recommendation in this verse is to go for spiritual happiness. It may taste like poison to begin with. The sugar candy may taste bitter to begin with, but by having faith in the instructions of the Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, if one persists, then the same sugar candy will taste like nectar. Prabhupada then talks about this disease, right? So this disease, as we know, is material disease. He says there is an individual accountability cause of the disease and a collective cause of the disease. So avidya, ignorance, forgetfulness. Like Prabhupada says, forgetting Krishna, the living entity, has been attracted by the external feature external feature from time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy Maya gives him all kinds of misery in this material existence because it is unnatural existence. It is a living entity's constitutional position to be an eternal servant of Krishna. Right? And if one is forgetful of that, then one will experience misery. If one is in a position that is not constitutional, it is inevitably going to result in misery. What are the other individual causes? The individual is distracted by Maya. So there is avidya, then there is forgetfulness, then there is distraction by Maya in terms of the modes of material nature, aspects of material existence. There is durashraya, which is false shelter. So taking shelter of the material world. Hope against hope, Prabhupada says that the material world may repeatedly serve misery, but the person still has hopes that the next time it will serve happiness. Right? So there was an experiment that was done on people who are addicted to gambling, and while they were gambling at different stages, the level of different secretions in the blood was measured, and it was interesting to see that when a person gambled and lost, then there was a rush of hormone in the body called serotonin. And serotonin is essentially a happiness positivity hormone. Right? So it was a little confusing that if you lost big in a gambling, and this was people who are addicted to gambling, why would they feel happy? And then the understanding is that they would think that now that I have lost, next time I will win. That the bad luck that I have has been exhausted. All that remains for me is my good luck. So that is this durashaya, hoping against hope. That even though repeatedly a person may have gambled and lost, but they will still continue to hope because of this addiction to gambling. And similarly, people who are trying to derive pleasure from the material world have repeatedly been frustrated by it. But then still they continue to hope against hope because they're unable to learn from their mistakes. Then corrective cause of the diseases, right? Their corrective cause is coming from leaders who are atheistic, right? So atheistic leaders, so they preach atheistic philosophy and they mislead people, especially in India under the rule of the Britishers. There were a lot of these so-called Vedantists who came up, who had read the Vedas, and they were preaching. It appeared that they were preaching from the Vedas with a lot of charisma and talking about morality and social causes, but rejecting Krishna in that, right? Saying, Daritri Narayan and Manav Seva, Madhav Seva. So those kind of slogans which sounded good, but there is no basis of that. Prabhupada would say it's actually Madhav Seva, Manav Seva. That if you water the root, the the leaves are automatically watered. Right? So the leaders are blind, they are misled, and they mislead those who are follow. And then there are those who actively oppose the devotees, right? So there are ones who simply are being misled themselves, and then there are those who not only are being misled by themselves, but they actively criticize those who are trying to follow the right path. Right? In Isa Upanishad, such people are very strongly condemned, right? where it is said that the followers of avidya fall to the deepest regions of hell, and more so to the followers of vidya or so-called knowledge. And the reason they fall even more because they make a pretense of having knowledge, and they criticize those who do not follow their path. So because they create this corrective environment, and devotees who are practicing in this current day and age have personal experience of this, and that it is difficult to practice Krishna consciousness because the society is not conducive to it. Like when I was in India, one of my distant relatives, he had passed from his engineering college, and he had joined a temple full time as a brahmachari. And there was so much of outrage against him. Right? And when I went, and uh, in- the- firstly they all like were upset at me that it's my fault, and and then they said you should talk to him and convince him to leave the temple, come back home, take a job. And I said, I appreciate what he's doing. How can I speak to him otherwise? I did speak to him, uh, just to make sure that he's not being fanatical about it. He's taking a balanced decision, which he was. But the environment is very hostile for people. Almost all devotees have this experience to some level or other. Unless they're coming from a devotee family, they will have this collective consciousness impacting their personal desires. So what happens? Krishna says, "Namam dushritanam budha." He says that I'm not visible to those who are sinful, because they are trying to turn their backs to Krishna. Krishna turns his back to to them, and then they say, "Aha! I told you there is no Krishna," because they are not able to see Krishna because of their sinful nature. It reinforces the paradigm which they began with. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then they go and say, "Look, there is no Krishna," right? And in this way, they propagate this notion to innocent people also. So, what does this verse say? This verse says that in the beginning, a person is situated when the senses have a strong desire to enjoy the sense objects. Right? So, this is the state of jaundice, where the sugar candy is tasting bitter. Krishna describes it in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Intelligent person does not take part in the source of misery, which is due to contact with the material senses. Such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So when one develops this consciousness, then one goes to the point where the person from the platform of the soul serves the Lord. Right. So essentially, what this verse is doing is taking us from a state where the senses are wanting to enjoy the material sense objects to a state where the soul is desiring to engage in the service of Krishna. Right. In 628, Krishna says, the self-controlled yogi constantly engaged in yoga becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest state of perfect happiness and transcendental loving service to the Lord. Right? So this is where this verse wants the practicing devotee to go, by regularly chanting that which may initially seem distasteful, which is the chanting of the holy name. Okay, so what is the cure? So so we have identified what sick is. Let's see what healthy is. So what is healthy? Healthy is Jiva Sarupa Krishnera Nityadas. That is healthy. That Krishnera Nityadas, understanding oneself to be the eternal servant of Krishna. That is the healthy state. Now, that healthy condition is lost when one is covered by Krishna's illusory energy. When one becomes envious of Krishna, so they become sick, and at this point they take interest in the temporary sense enjoyment. So this is known as durashraya, or false suffering. Right? So the jiva by nature is taking ashraya. Right? It is minute. It always takes shelter, but now it's taking shelter in Krishna's Mahamaya, which is the cause of suffering. Now, one must know that for jaundice, sugar candy is the only specific medicine. Similarly, in the present confused state of humanity, Krishna consciousness, the chanting of the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, is the only remedy for setting the world aright. This is justa. Chanting is the process of bhajana kriya. Like justa bhajana kriya, chanting is the only cure. Just like sugar candy is the only cure for jaundice, chanting is the only cure in this current day and age for avidya, for material absorption. So Prabhupada says this Krishna consciousness movement may not be very palatable for a diseased person. Sri Rupa Goswami nonetheless advises that if one wants to be cured of the material disease, he must take to it with great care and attention. Adarat, very carefully. So adarat means being nivrit of anarthas. So till the stage of anartha nivritti, it is the endeavor of the practicing devotee. After that, Nishtha, Ruchi, Shakti, the proportion of what gets bestowed by Krishna increases. Like, so if you make a graph, earlier on, it starts with almost 100% effort of the devotee, very little mercy from Krishna. Like, some mercy, but mostly the effort of the devotee. But as the person makes advancement, the effort component reduces and mercy component increases. And the fulcrum, the turning point is anartha nivritti. After anartha nivritti, it's like you've been pushing a rock uphill, and anartha nivritti is you reach the top of the hill. Now you push it a little bit more, the rock will roll down by its own, under its own weight. So till the stage of anartha nivritti, a devotee has to be very, very careful and carefully chanting the holy name, right? Anudina means all the time. So Prabhupada is mapping these to the different stages, right? So Justa is bhajana kriya, Adarat is anartha nivritti, Anudina is nishtha. This will completely uproot the causes of the disease. This is anartha nivritti, and the result is swad vikramat bhavati. So this is ruchi. So that's how Rupa Goswami has used these words to show the different stages of advancement. That it begins with justa, bhajana kriya, right? Then adarat, very carefully chanting. Carefully chanting means avoiding offenses. One reaches the stage of anartha nivritti. Then anudina means without interruption. That's a symptom of nishtha. Anishtha is caused by anarthas, right? So anudina at the stage of nishtha, then all the causes of the disease has been uprooted, right? So even though at the stage of anartha nivritti, the majority of the anarthas are there, but still there are traces of it. So it continues to be uprooted. The jiva continues to be purified until they reach the stage of swad vikramat bhavati, right? Then that same chanting that was initially distasteful is now very, very relishable. That's the stage of ruchi. So when one attains the pure stage, he is immediately liberated, uttamadhikari. This is known as bhav mahadvagni nirvapanam. Prabhupada is quoting from the first verse of Shishtastakam, Cheto Darpan Marjanam Bhav Mahadvagni Nirvapanam Shreha Kairavi Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Ananam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipada Purnam Pritsvadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vajayate Si Krishna Sankirtanam. Right? So Bhav Mahadvagni Nirvapanam, right? Mahadvagni. So Dava Agni is this great forest fire of material existence. Mahagni, not an ordinary Agni, but one is liberated from it. Right? So now, beyond the stage of sadhana, one is now going from durashraya to surashraya, right? Suashraya. Suashraya means from bad shelter to good shelter, to the shelter of Krishna. This is now indicating the stages of beyond ruchi, the stage of the next verse will talk about still the sadhaka stage, but ragunag stage, where the person starts feeling spontaneous devotion. Then where to get the cure, right? So Prabhupada is offering ISKCON as the purpose of ISKCON is offering this cure to people. Like just like you have a hospital, and the hospital advertises your disease. You have a disease, come to us, we'll cure the disease and make you healthy. So in the same way, ISKCON is a hospital for those who have the disease of material existence. Right? You come to the hospital, the doctor sees you, gives you some medicine, gives you some things to do and things not to do. You follow it, you become healthy. So Swami Prabhupada is inviting those who are materially bewildered to come to ISKCON. And there, by the mercy of devotees, Sadguru, Sadhu, Shastra, then you're given this prescription of chant the holy name. Right? And then do's and don'ts. Follow the four regulative principles, worship the deities, serve the devotees. And as you follow the prescription, the disease of material existence gets cured. Right? So Prabhupada takes us through the stages of the advancement in bhakti, that one comes to the temple based on some faith. Everybody has some story. Like in my case, it was mostly for prasadam. Right? We were vegetarians, and at the time when I was here in the early in '92, there were not many vegetarian restaurants. Right? Everything was non-vegetarian. And then somebody told me there's a temple over here and they have good vegetarian food, and the best part is it's free. Right? So then with some amount of shraddha, even though it was mostly greed, but still there was some faith with which I went and started having prasadam over there. By the influence of the prasad, then faith increased. And then what happens is, then devotees in the temple start coming and preaching to you, sadhu sang, right? They say, okay, we have a Sunday program, come to that. We have Bhakti Vikshas, join that. We have Bhagavad Gita study, join that. So sadhu sangha, and then begins. Right? So when one becomes more and more firm in sadhu sangha, then one takes initiation. That is bhajana kriya. Right? At that point, one is more or less committed now. I do have a strong desire to make progress. And what happens at the time of initiation? Right? Bhajana kriya is the spiritual master instructs the disciple, just start. Now you regularly chant minimum 16 rounds of the Maha Mantra and avoid and follow the four regulative principles. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, and no gambling. Now this is the process that bhajana kriya that lasts for a long time. Right? That's why the whole recommendation of utsaha nishchaya dharya, follow it with enthusiasm and determination, because there will be fall downs, there will be reversibles. Dharya, be patient. Don't expect to chant one round and become a pure devotee, right? But if one who stays with it, anartha nivritti. And anartha nivritti is a process, it's not a stage. Right? It's not that you chant, the moment you chant more than X number of rounds, one day morning you get up and all the anarthas are gone. Right? So every beat that you chant takes away an anartha. Right? Once I was in Tirkadam for a japa retreat, and the point that was made was that every 4 rounds that you chant, it unlocks a kuntha. So kuntha is one of the knots of material attraction that is binding the soul to the subtle body. Right? So every 4 round, and these are ways that the acharyas inspire disciples to, devotees to chant. Right? So the by and by, gradually, the anarthas, they are vanquished, and avidya moolhantri. Right? So the ignorance, it is destroyed from the mool, from the source. Then the person becomes fixed in executing his Krishna conscious activities, right? So nishtha appears, and then from nishtha, then asakti. So asakti is, now one becomes unshakable, that this is what I want. And then swad vikramat bhavati, and then one becomes to develop swad, becomes to develop taste. Right? And this then further matures into bhava, or the awakening of the dormant love of God. Right? So note Prabhupada's word, that awakening of the dormant love of Godhead, because the soul is always situated in ecstatic love of Godhead, but it becomes dormant under the weight of the ignorance, and that is now awakened. So Prabhupada says the Krishna conscious movement is specially meant for creating an atmosphere in which people can take to chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. And so I thought it would be also good to read the 7 aims of ISKCON, because Srila Prabhupada explicitly, so this verse is Srila Prabhupada's meditation in establishing ISKCON, and also the 7 aims, right? So the first is to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. To propagate a consciousness of Krishna, God, as it is revealed in the great scriptures of India, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. To bring the members of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna, the prime entity, thus developing the idea within the members and humanity at large that each soul is a part and parcel of the quality of Godhead, Krishna. To teach and encourage the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting of the holy name of God as revealed in the teachings of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. To erect for the members and for society at large a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. To bring the members closer together for the purpose of teaching a simpler, more natural way of life. And finally, with a view towards achieving the aforementioned purposes, to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writings. Right? So each of this aim is strongly grounded in Rupa Goswami's teaching. Right? And separately there are classes that analyze these aims and correlate them with the teachings of the Vaishnavacharyas. So some slides that are more or less quick ways to understand is how to control the mind with intelligence. Right, the quality of intelligence is conviction, and the quality of the heart is commitment. Right? Now we know that higher than the mind is the intelligence. Right. So given that conviction is the quality of intelligence and commitment is the quality of the heart, so conviction comes by reading the scriptures. So by sincerely reading the scriptures, one's intelligence develops conviction. And with that conviction, the mind is controlled, and with the mind, the senses are controlled. Now, commitment is the quality of the heart, and that comes from associating with devotees. Like so it's said that by reading the scriptures, we know what to do. And by associating with devotees, we are able to do it. So there are very, very few people, there are some people, mostly because of Purvaras, who read Prabhupada's book all by themselves and started practicing. And there are very, very few people, they stand out by exception. There's one person who found a Bhagavad Gita in a garbage bin, took it back and started chanting. And he was chanting for many, many years before he came in contact with devotees, right? But they're very, very special cases. But generally speaking, by intelligence one develops some conviction. This is the right thing to do. But actually doing it happens when they're in an association of people who are also doing it. So how to make the intelligence superior to the mind? The example is that consider the mother to be intelligence and the child to be the mind, the guru to be the doctor, and the medicine to be the holy name. So if one has to control the mind, then the intelligence has to surrender to the instructions of the doctor or the guru and take the medicine, which is the chanting of the holy name. So let's make our intelligence fit. So fit is understand the futility, insubstantiality, and the temporality of the material world. right? And this is more by the taking shelter of the scriptures. So with this we can understand the cause of our sickness, right? By seeing how everything in this material nature is eventually reversed. It's futile, it is temporary, right? And even if it is there, it is never really satisfying, it's insubstantial. So one understands that the cause of our suffering is material nature. Dive deep into Krishna consciousness, duration, intensity, variety, and extent. Right. So this how devotees take to spiritual life. Right. So one should not become weekend warriors. Like there are some people who will just go to the temple on the weekend and then not do anything, or there are some people who will only celebrate festivals and not do it, but do it all the time, duration with intensity, right? Maintain intensity. They will be, because this is still the stage of anarthas, so there will be anishtha. It may be varying, but one should try and maintain the intensity. And variety helps. It's like when a child is not eating, then the mother may distract the child. Sometimes they'll give the child a toy, or they will give the child something to watch, and while the child is absorbed, then the mother is quickly feeding food to the child. So similarly, in a disease case, the mind and intelligence, they are averse to spiritual activities, but by creating variety, sometimes going out on Harinam, sometimes worshipping the deities, sometimes serving the Vaishnavas, sometimes listening to classes. So the mind is absorbed and extent, right? So the scope is gradually widened. So this is the cure. Dive deep into Krishna consciousness, right? Sing your way to happiness. This is Harinam. The nature of Harinam is specially increasing, not dependent on any material condition. And the holy name is very, very generous. Little bit investment, lot of return. Right? So this is the cure that we have. And Prabhupada says that don't just be cured, but increase your health. Right? So going beyond the cure. So devotees who sincerely practice will go to the stage of bhava. So this particular verse takes one to the stage of ruchi. But it's not that that's all that the holy name can deliver. And so this is actually talking about from disease to cure, but there's a stage of where a healthy person can become even more healthy, right? And that is progressing once again. And the same sugar candy can take one from disease to cure and from cure to healthy. So the same holy name can take one to the stage of bhava, and then one's dormant love for Krishna is awakened. That is recognized by three symptoms. That one is no longer invested in the bodily concept. One transcends that, understands Krishna and Maya, right? So the nature of Krishna's energy, and most importantly, one is undisturbed by Maya, right? So essentially, the person is now existing at a spiritual level and is able to see the world as it is. In the first canto of the Bhagavatam, when Narad Muni preaches to Srila Vyasadeva, then Vyasadeva goes into a trance, and then he sees this. He sees Krishna, he sees Maya Devi standing a little beyond Krishna. He sees the whole material world under the influence of Maya, right? And then now he sees everything as it is. Then he writes the Bhagavatam there. In the Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita chapter 22, it is said Krishna is compared to sunshine, Maya is compared to darkness. Wherever there is sunshine, there cannot be darkness. As soon as one takes to Krishna consciousness, the darkness of illusion, the influence of external energy will immediately vanish. Right? So japa has the power of curing and going beyond the cure. Like, so when a Kanishta Adhikari, a person at an initial stage, then a lot of bewilderment. the four regulative principles, do this, don't do that. Chanting has no taste for such a person, right? So even the chanting is like, it's like a weight on the head of the person. The person may do it because of deference to the commitment to the spiritual master, but that's it, right? Sometimes one devotee was saying in a class that we don't really chant on our beats, we chant on our counting beats. So we have this counting beats that are 16 beats on that, and then essentially we are counting that. One done, two done, now only three remain, two remains, one remain. That's because not much attraction to chanting, right? More commitment to finishing it because there is some deference to the order of the spiritual master. So this is known as Nama-Prat stage, right? The devotee is a Kanishta Adhikari. His chanting is infested with the 10 offenses, right? We won't do the offenses, it will take too much time. But these offenses that are given in the Padma Puran, and they're representative of different kinds of material consciousness. Like to consider Krishna to be on the same level as the demigods, not a complete faith in the chanting of the holy name, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. Right, so they're different flavors of avidya. Right, so this is namaprad. So one is chanting in an offensive stage. So this is like a person with jaundice who's licking the sugar candy and it is feeling very bitter. So the person is chanting, but the chanting is feeling like a burden. Right? So chanting is inattentive, without taste, and is done under external compulsion. Then Madhyamadhikari, intermediate person, this is known as the Namabhas stage. Right? So this is for the Madhyamadhikari, where the chanting is now free of the 10 offenses. Because by the process of chanting, the avidya has been clarified. So the chanting is attentive, without offenses, and without personal motivation. And then finally it goes to the stage of Uttamadhikari, which is Shuddhanam. Shuddhanam is for an advanced devotee where the chanting is spontaneous, with great taste, free of offenses, and completely absorbing. Right? So just by the chanting of the holy name, this path becomes available to the devotees to go from Namapra to Namabhas and Namabhas to Shuddha Nam. Now this particular verse is talking about the stage of Namabhas, where by the potency of chanting, one is reaching the stage of ruchi, and so that is there till Namabhas. Wanted to share some anecdotal examples, just because one is when you see real life examples, then it further increases your faith. Right? So there was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada called Kushagraha Das, right? And the other devotees called him Crazy Peter because his mind was very unsettled and very filled with a lot of energy. He would talk all the time and talk all kinds of nonsense. So he went to Prabhupada. Prabhupada would say ISKCON is not for crazies and lazies, right? That is a way of saying that not for the hippies who are just druggies. But Prabhupada being Prabhupada, this person went to Prabhupada. Prabhupada initiated him, and Prabhupada gave him the service that you learn Sanskrit. Right. Now, so one has to have that vision, right, which Prabhupada had, that for a person who is barely able to concentrate, the service of learning Sanskrit was given. Prabhupada would say that even for an intelligent person, 7 years, they would become beginner proficient in Sanskrit. But this particular person, Kushagra Prabhu, he actually became a prominent Sanskrit scholar. He wrote many books in Sanskrit, translated the Goswami literature, assisted Prabhupada in his translation. Why? Because of the chanting of the holy name. There's another example of a devotee in Italy called Il Mato. Il matto in Italian means the mad one. And he was also, kind of like, crazy. One of the things that he would do was on Sundays, he would take a whole tray of pizza and eat it by himself. He would dress in a crazy, crazy way. But the thing was that he did not leave the association of devotees. Right? And a particular devotee was saying that he knew Il Matto, and in his mind he was like, eventually, soon he's going to go away. And so he lost contact with him. 12 years later on, this particular devotee happened to be in Vrindavan, in the Krishna Balaram temple, and he was waiting in morning Mangalarati to take darshan of the deities, and a pujari stepped out to blow the conch, and then he looked up and he saw the pujari was actually Il Matto. Right? He was dressed in saffron, and pujari is meaning very, very strongly in the mode of goodness. He looked very peaceful and happy, right? All this by the process of chanting. So this is the potency of the holy name, right? There was another case that I told earlier on was a devotee was diagnosed with terminal cancer, right? And Prabhupada asked him to chant, and he was sitting in Vrindavan and chanting and waiting to die because the doctors had said he'll die very soon. But time went on, he kept chanting and he didn't die. So he was curious as to what happened, so he went to the doctor again. The doctor said, I don't see any symptoms of the disease in you. So chanting is like Chintamani. It's like Kalpavriksha. You touch it and whatever you want, it gives you. So this person wanted good health, and the holy name gave him good health. And when he got good health, at least in his case, he left the movement there. But nevertheless, the potency of the holy name is there. So what's the conclusion? That the first 6 verses are preparatory verses. The first verse is a verse on morality. Right? The second and third verses are on a platform of Shraddha. And the fourth, fifth, and sixth verse are sadhu sang, associating with how to associate with devotees, right? And then from the 7th verse onwards, one is now ready to chant the holy name, bhajana kriya. One is now ready to actually execute devotional service as prescribed in the age of Kali. Right? Is the chanting dependent on material condition? No, but the chanter is. Right? This is an important point that is made. Like if you say that the holy name is fully independent, what is the need for all this preparation? What is the need for vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam? What is the need for avoiding atyahara, prayaschas, prajalpa? Right? These are all material conditions. So if chanting is spiritual, what is the need to become materially ready to chant? And the truth is that chanting is not dependent on material condition, the chanter is. So if a person himself is too materially absorbed, then his chanting will always be namaprad. And after some time, he will not be able to even chant in namaprad. Right? So this purification is to enable the person come in some form of contact with the holy name. And after that, the potency of the holy name will allow one to make spiritual advancements. And that itself is sufficient to give all kinds of perfections. Like we'll see later on, just by the force of chanting, like one will go to the stage of bhava and prema. So the stage of prema is, or going beyond the stage of prema, is the perfection of associating with Krishna. And at that time, even the minutest traces of anarthas are eradicated, right? And all this is delivered by the potency of chanting. So we'll end over here. Very, very wonderful verse, a lot of lessons, wonderful pastimes, by Srila Prabhupada in this respect, wonderful teachings by this respect. And most of us who are practicing devotees are actually in this stage. So we can actually at different levels on this spectrum. So we can actually experientially meditate on it. So we'll end over here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.